Presented by Botano, Nick Alberga and Jay Rosehill back together again to discuss the very latest in Leafs Nation with training camp set to kick off in a few weeks' time. Rosie, how are you, pal? Can you explain this time of year for a National Hockey League player as you get set for training camp?
Yeah, it's a bit hectic. Summer's over in their minds, no doubt about it. Your
No more
training's come.
boozing.
No more booze and lay off the booze. And I always laughed about that because like 2 weeks before training camp, you're like, no going out, no boozing. And then like mid-season, it's like, we got a game in 2 days. And it's like, yeah, let's have a fucking rookie party. But funny enough, as it goes, you're in the mode. You've had your time off. You're chomping at the bit to get rolling right now. And guys are looking at logistics. Where am I going to live? How am I going to get down there? You know, you're setting up cable. When's my wife going? Where's the school for the kids? Holy shit. It's a bit mayhem. And all the while you're trying to focus on maybe making a team or getting into a new city. So definitely hectic for all those players right now.
I noticed that from a couple of show buddies. Maybe they're just ghosting me, but I noticed recently they haven't been able to do as much as they were able to do a couple months prior, right? But it really shows you, and even us as broadcasters, like, I don't know where the summer went, man. Like, next thing you know, it's September and we're getting set for season number 2 here of Leafs Morning Take. But I'm sure it feels the same way for a hockey player, no?
Yeah, it flies by, and you know, you're training and you take your vacation and stuff, but it's just like anyone else. Like,
Yeah.
summer flies by. You know, the sun goes behind the horizon these days and it gets chilly as hell, and you just know those leaves are turning, the snow's coming, and it's ready for hockey season. So, you know, if you're jacked about hockey, maybe you won't be as depressed that summer's over and you're chomping at the bit to watch some NHL.
I'm really fired up for a multitude of reasons, but I won't lie. Like, we still have a 9-month odyssey before it starts for real, if you know what I'm saying. And I said this in October, we're going to go through the same journey once again. I'm going to bitch about a loss to Arizona. I'm sure if they play them in October, I'm going to bitch about a loss to, like, it's going to happen again. I'm ready for it. I know you are, though.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I like that they made some changes. They're not completely running it back. Yeah, the core four is there and everything. They're all great players, and they've had some success last year, not to the level that they wanted to. But I'm a little bit excited that they did make some changes. We got Tree living in there. We got some goaltenders, some D, some forwards. We got some grit. We got some bang. There's stuff to be excited about and to look forward to. So I'm a little more positive than maybe we were last year. But again, we're gonna go into it knowing that this regular season doesn't win championships.
Pretty much it. Firstly, if you haven't already subscribed, please sure to do so on our YouTube page at the Leafs Nation 401, at the Leafs Nation 401. If you're listening or watching right now and not subscribed, please do so. We'll smile and make our life much easier if you subscribe to our YouTube page. Also, wherever you get your podcast, just search Leafs Morning Take and we'll pop up there. Again, much appreciated on that side. We've really grown since we put the YouTube page together a couple months back. And of course, year one of Leafs Morning Take was a big time success. And not to disclose too much, but we're going bigger and better for year number 2, so can't wait for that. But Rosie, let's jump into things. The Leafs signed Simon Benoit, so a 1-year contract for a depth defenseman at $775K. Not much more than that. Played 78 games for the Ducks last year. He was a -29. I don't read much into that. The Ducks were dreadful. He had 60 penalty minutes. At the very least, he adds some depth and a bit of size on the back end.
Yeah, I mean, he's a warm body, you know. He's not he's a low defenseman with, you know, some upside. You know, defensemen tend to develop late and hit their stride a little bit later than forwards do. It's a difficult position to get your bearings, and I think he's 24 years old, so he's still young enough. He's got upside, no doubt, but you know, it looks like our top 7 are kind of locked in. He's going to be that depth piece. You know, if we get some injuries and stuff, instead of calling up, you know, a Marley with 0 experience, which can also be beneficial, but you'll have a guy there with some experience who can play in the NHL. Like you said, numbers aren't ideal, but he was playing on a dog shit team, so you can't hold him over the coals for that. He's a body that's going to be there and ready to play if need be. So not groundbreaking news by any means, but you know, they got a little bit of depth in there and covered their ass somewhat.
I think you nailed it, because I think you look at any NHL team, especially in the volatility known as the NHL these days, you're going to need more than 6-7 defensemen. Guys get hurt. You don't know what's going to happen. So at the very least, like the way I view it, it's a guy who has NHL experience. And while there's a lot of players who play in this league, it's tough to breed that, especially at his age, especially the way he plays. And I think you need that aspect. Like, we talked a lot about Luke Shen and the void that he left. It was a small sample size, but that type of player, I think is really lacking from this back end right now. And I hope Benoit's a guy who they can filter in now and again. You know, we'll see what they do with that back end. You talked about the 7 guys prior to him and stuff like that. But I think they need that element of size and like grit. And I'm not sure Benoit's like fully that guy, but they need that type of player.
Yeah, and if I was his agent, if I was his friend, or if I was his dad or his wife, I would say, hey, why don't you stand out from the crowd, go into training camp with a little FU in your attitude, a little chip on your shoulder, go and hit everything that moves, give a guy an extra little shot after the whistle, clear the front of the crease, play like a bit of an asshole. If you need to drop the gloves in and wrestle a guy down to the ground. That's what, exhibition season's all about, is making some noise, opening some eyes. You know what this team's lacking. Like you just said, they lost that Luke Schenn presence, and he's really made a name for himself to the point where he was, wanted on the free agency market. He's gone. You can fill that void easy. You want a job? Do you want to be on the Marlies or do you want to be on the Leafs? Go in there, play with a chip on your shoulder, use your size, bang and crash, be physical, be a presence, and you'll have a very difficult decision that you'll put on the laps of the brass of the Toronto Maple Leafs, because they know they need that right now.
I won't lie. I'm sort of disappointed because I thought this team still needed that type of guy. And I don't think it's Benoit. I would have loved like a Zadorov from Calgary. And to me, this Benoit signing, at least in my world, pretty much waves the flag and says, hey, this is the roster. This is the back end we're going into training camp with. It's not a big deal. Like I still think they're pretty good, but I still wonder if they're deep enough. So the way it's slated right now, Riley Brody, McCabe Klingberg, Giordano Liljegren, and then Benoit and Timmins as your 7-8. Ideally, I think I want the bottom 4, if you will, to be a bit stronger, a bit deeper, and maybe a bit more versatile, a bit harder to play against. But again, we're really gasping at straws. I think it is a deep Maple Leafs team, but I think down the road at some point in time this season, they're going to need to add that type of defenseman, Rosie.
Yeah, you'd hope so. And, we wanted to get that at, free agency. It happened to a point with Klingberg. The jury's out on what he's going to be like. We know he's capable of playing really high quality NHL defenseman type hockey in this league. He hasn't done it in a while. And I always feel like it's a lost cause when you expect someone to come into Toronto and be better than they have been ever or in the past. It's kind of like it's difficult to perform in Toronto. The proof's in the pudding. And to expect a guy to come in and wow you is kind of, naive maybe to a point. But that being said, if he comes out and shows some solid defensive and offensive defensive play for a defenseman, that's going to be a big addition. But I agree with you. It doesn't seem like they're quite there. It doesn't seem like, oh, this is a Stanley Cup caliber defensive squad. And when you look at the guys who win the cups, they always have those big, thick, tough D that are solid and responsible and can take control of the game and slow it down if need be, and chip in offensively and be rugged and tough. And I mean, they don't look like that right now. But like you just said to start this show, going into training camp, this is kind of not, the holy grail of the season. So we got time to move things around. Tree Living can work his magic a little bit if some trades come in down the pipe, down Christmas time or the deadline. I mean, the sky's the limit for what this decor can look like going into the playoffs, but I think it's a good start.
Yeah, to be fair, I think Brad Treliving knows this. And I mean, he pretty much intimated to the fact when he took over this job that maybe they need to change their look a bit on the back end. And that's why they've been linked to some guys throughout this offseason. I know it's a copycat league, but you look at the Vegas Golden Knights, their body of work, how big like every defenseman on that roster was. And then you try to compare them to the Maple Leafs and say, hey, could they boast anything close to that? Now, granted, they don't have a Pietrangelo. They don't have a Theodore. I mean, their best they can offer, pretty good defenseman, obviously in a Morgan Riley, but he's not of that ilk, of that cloth, if you will. So that's my wonder sort of moving forward is how can they find a way to modify their back end? Like I agree with you on Klingberg, but he's very offensive minded. He is not good defensively. To think he can be that guy who's like a perennial all-star again, I think is a tough stretch, especially in this market. That would be an amazing story. Don't get me wrong. If John Klingberg somehow returns to form as a member of the Toronto Maple Leafs, but I understand why they got him. Like he can move the puck, he can play that type of game, and I think he can get the puck to the big boys up front. So there's nothing wrong with that. I just think when it comes to the playoffs and you look at the body of work and the success of recent teams in recent memory, you need that type of defenseman. That's why we love Schenner. Guys like that who are going to make things difficult to play against for the opponent.
Yeah, and I think that it's a good start what we have here with the defense, but it just there's a missing piece. I want that stud. I want that, that Duncan Keith or that that Letang type stud who can really be like your number one guy. And then the guys we're mentioning can kind of be that supporting cast who can really, you know, add that depth and that layers when, you know, you're resting your big boys, get out there and still contribute and not be a liability. And then I would like to see some physicality, like another big step in the physicality. And I hope that McCabe and some of these guys can kind of provide that and step up. And it's tough to ask guys to do things that they don't normally do. But to me, I just keep banging my head against the wall saying you can't ask a guy to go, you know, put up 50 points. Like, it's just not there. But everyone can finish their checks. Everyone can play with a chip on their shoulder. It's just so frustrating when a team needs something so badly. And all these guys that are physically and mentally capable of it, just like, not me, not me. Like, why can't every guy, you know, this fucking decor needs to bulk up and play a little bit stiffer, and every guy's capable of it. Like, again, you don't have to fight, but just play meaner, play tougher, finish your checks. Don't get pushed around. Stand up with your chest out. Why can't these guys do it? It just drives me to no end, especially when there's like 6'3" bodies standing there. And it's like, we need a guy like this, but we can't get it. We're at the cap crunch and there's no one available. And we don't have anyone to give up to get this guy. And all these guys are like, it's like, you could all do that. You could show up on day one and play big and play mean and finish your checks and clear the crease and say F you to every guy that comes near your goalie. It's not that hard. And it just frustrates me when guys just are like, not even on their radar to even attempt to try to do that.
Of course, everything can change if they decide to make a blockbuster trade, right? And I may be in the minority on this. Like, I love Nylander, I love Marner, I love Matthews, I love Tavares. Tavares is untradeable. I think he's a great captain for this team, but I'm almost at a point where I'm banging my head against the wall because it's the same shit every offseason. Not to say this one has been the same as ones previous, but the nucleus is the same, right? And I think if you really, really want to get through and find a way to get the job done in the Stanley Cup playoffs, to me, the next logical thing would be to make a blockbuster trade. And maybe it's a Nylander, but I think if you're making a significant trade, they have to get at least one defenseman back who's like a top 4 bona fide stud. Easier said than done, but that's I think a way to turn over your roster, right?
Yeah, and that's difficult. I mean, Tree Living's kind of bent over a barrel right now. He's vulnerable and he doesn't have the leverage he would like. And
I don't think it's him either. I think it's Shanny. I think Shanny calls everything.
Okay. Sure, whoever it is. When it comes down to Nylander, I think if it's going to be a blockbuster trade, it's going to be Willie. And I think that they're vulnerable to have guys take advantage of them because they're not really in the driver's seat when it comes to it. And if they unload him, what are they going to get back? I don't know. Hopefully a big stud D-man, but it's going to leave a big gaping hole in their forwards and their offense. And that's just more pressure on, the Marners and the Tavareses and the Matthews in the playoffs to get it done. And as we saw, it was difficult to get that 2-goal lead in the playoffs as it is with Nylander. So you delete him. It's hard to think of a scenario where we absolutely got better. And at the same time, with the cap situation that we've been left in, basically thanks to Dubas, it's going to be tough to sign him as well. So interesting stuff coming down the pike. There's not a huge time crunch on when this needs to happen, obviously, but it'll be interesting this season to see how that whole scenario shakes out.
Yeah, something to monitor at the very least. So we mentioned it. The Leafs are capped out. We've been talking about this for like 5 to 7 years, but anything's possible. I know they're horned up in Edmonton. They got some PTO guys. They got Sam Gagner back for his 15th tour in Edmonton. They got Brandon Sutter. So let's look at some logical PTO options for the Maple Leafs to at least push the other guys along in training camp. Some names I've think of at the top of my head: Josh Bailey, Zach Kassian, Jesse Puljujärvi, Tyler Mott. To me, it makes more sense, and I don't know if you would agree. And again, this has to be a perfect world because they don't have much to cook with in terms of cap, but they can invite guys to camp. I would look at the back end to add some depth to maybe outplay a Benoit or a Timmins and sneak their way on the team. So I'm looking at Ethan Bear. Mark Pysyk is a guy who makes a lot of sense because he's got versatility. He can play up front and the back end. And then center-wise, like Dylan Gambrell, I guess on paper, Rosie, is the four-line C for this team. Played for Ottawa last year. He was okay. But there are some veterans who are available on the market that could make a lot of sense, especially come the Stanley Cup playoffs. Paul Stastny, Derek Brassard, Colin White's another guy. Guys like that. So what would you do in terms of PTOs here?
Yeah, all guys are interesting. Like some of those names that you see that are, a few years removed from, when they're the talk of the town type thing. But it would depend on, you'd have to do your homework. You'd have to crunch the numbers and go deep into the situation that these players were in. Are they just getting older? Did they get kind of pushed out by the younger guys? Was there no room for them in the organization? Why are they unsigned free agents, you know, and try to find a guy who's, you know, you just kind of see the writing on the wall and how it happened, and you think there's some good hockey left in them. It costs you nothing to bring a guy on a professional tryout, come to camp, see what you can do, and, you know, see if they can rattle some cages and open some eyes and see if they got some good hockey left in them. And, you know, like you said, some of those guys you mentioned have been, you know, pretty solid players, and they all bring different elements to the team. But to bring guys in on PTOs and give them a chance to earn their spot, you know, it's nice to have at camp 2 guys like that who are going to be going absolutely balls out in training camp and in exhibition season. You know, that's kind of contagious, where, you know, you look at this guy fighting for his life and fighting for his career. Other guys are going through the motions in exhibition game. You know, maybe it'll kick some guys in the ass to you know, produce throughout that type of the season or that time of the season, and maybe make it hard on the brass and the people that are going to pick the final roster. It doesn't cost you anything to do it.
I really want to see Bobby McMahon crack that roster at a training camp. We'll see. Like, he had some flashes, you know, in a short sample size last year. And I think if you can do that, then you can move Lafferty up the middle, and Gambrell is your last forward, and he's your depth guy. And that makes more sense to me. But again, anything can play out in training camp. I don't mind the idea of like internal competition. It's something they preached in recent seasons for the Leafs. Just some guys to push in camp. To not make it like a country carnival again, or a country club, I should say, not a carnival, but a country club atmosphere. I think that's been the problem with this team for X amount of years, and it starts in the regular season and it translates to the Stanley Cup playoffs. I want to see some urgency this year. Easier said than done. Urgency, accountability are my 2 big buzzwords for this Maple Leaf season.
Well, I like them, and, you know, those are the things it takes to win. And, you know, when this team is at its point where it's frustrating its fans and its legions of loyal people who want to see it do well, they are lacking those 2 things without a doubt. They kind of go through the motions. They stick to the outside. No one's willing to break through the wall and say, "Fuck you, I'm taking over this game."
Yeah.
And that's what's been frustrating with this organization for the last, go back as far as you want, but certainly since I've been paying strong attention to it, they're lacking that intensity level and that urgency and that accountability of, is someone going to take this team on their back this shift and change the momentum of this game? And they've had trouble doing that. So adding a piece, any piece that can do something like that and create an environment that's, you know, rubs off on other guys is certainly a welcome addition without doubt.
I got a big time question for you to wrap, Rosie. Are you ready for some football?
I am, actually, man. I'm kind of pumped about it. I was looking at my betting account there, and I'm like, man, this thing's been stagnant. I threw a few things on some golf here this summer, but man, there's been nothing going on. So I'm excited to get back to the NFL. I got my fantasy draft here coming up in a week or so. And I just about won the whole thing last year. First time playing fantasy. So I'm just excited to throw a couple bucks on some games, make it interesting, get back to the big show that is the NFL. It's that time of year.
Our friends are going to hook you up over Betano. Week 1 is around the corner. Betano is celebrating with Football Live Trivia on September 2nd at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Flex your bar trivia knowledge to earn your share of the weekly $500 prize pool. No betting is required to participate. I know Rosie is jacked for the start of football here in September. I'm probably going to take the back road, chill out for hockey to start, watch some October baseball. I'm looking forward to that as well. But lots coming in the sports world. And I don't know about you, I'm just so jacked for this hockey season to start in a couple weeks' time. Training camps will commence, and the next thing you know, in early October, about October 10th or 11th, the season will start for real here, Rosie.
Yeah, it'll be go time before you know it. Kids are getting back to school now, and you know what that means. So fall time is the time to start pumping for hockey, and maybe you'll get into football this year, man. Geez, I'm surprised a guy with your background knowledge, you don't know shit about the NFL.
I hate football with a passion. So
Why?
I'm sorry to say that, but make sure you check out the trivia contest, our friends at the Betano. But I will not watch any football. I'm sorry.
Stubborn.
Maybe documentaries. That's about it. I'll watch some documentaries. I did a bunch of those here in the off season. I'm primed and ready. But I'm a 2-sport, 3-sport guy. I like the NBA. I like basketball. I like football. I like hockey. That's it. Yeah, I know you hate that. We got to have more rants about LeBron James this season. But we'll leave it at that. Many thanks to producer Aaron. Of course, you, Rosie, are going to take a couple days off and head on to Nashville, right?
Yeah, going to Nash Vegas. And yeah, some of my family, my brother's birthday, he's turning 40, and my wife's never been there. And I used to run around there here and there when we were visiting for hockey. So we'll see if there's anything still kicking around that I am familiar with.
Let's hope that you come back with stories. Will you be seeing Luke Shen there?
I think we will bump into Luke Shen. Hal Gill's kicking around there too, so we'll probably have a couple beers with those guys. I'll send you some pics.
Make sure to go to my favorite bar that I fell in love with over at the draft. Jason Aldean's got a bar there, dude. It is tremendous. Like multiple stories, Tootsies. You know the deal down at Bridgestone and Broadway. I mean, it's a tremendous time. I'm sure you'll have some fun.
It is a wicked town. We're looking forward to it.
There you have it. That's Jay Rosehill. I'm Nick Alberga. Again, you can subscribe at the Leafs Nation 401 on YouTube. Search us wherever you get your podcast, Leafs Morning Take. And we'll be back quick and in a hurry as we get set for training camp here. Take care.